Thanks.
Well, hello and welcome to the final session of our online Write Around the Murray Festival. My name's Anne-Marie, Festival Director, coming to you from the Albury Library Museum, home of our festival here on Wiradjuri country. And I'd like to pay respect to the Wiradjuri people and their elders as the custodians of this country, and indeed pay respect to all First Nations people across the country and those joining us this afternoon. We are here at the end of 5 days of very wonderful events in our past lives, present tense themed festival. We've had fun playing around with this theme, and of course it has invited some very weighty, challenging and sobering topics. We've been deconstructing the past, peering into the future, and very much looking at where we are at this point in time. And I'm thrilled that we're bringing the festival home in the hands and the minds of poets. I think poetry has a unique capacity to hold the past and the future in profound ways. I think it's probably the most present tense form of writing in the way it both asks and shows us how to pay attention. For these reasons, I can't think of a better way to close the festival than by delving into the incredible collection of poetry that is Throat with Ellen van Neerven. And leading our delving is Dr Jeanine Leane, a Wiradjuri writer, poet and academic from southwest New South Wales. Her first volume of poetry, Dark Secrets After Dreaming, AD 1887 to 1961, won the Scanlon Prize for Indigenous Poetry, and her first novel, Purple Threads, won the David Uneasy Award for an unpublished Indigenous writer in 2010. Jeanine's recent book of poetry is Walk Back Over, and she is also the editor of a brand new anthology, Guwayu, for All Times, a collection of First Nations poems. In 2017, Jeanine was awarded the Oodgeroo Noonuccal Poetry Prize and the University of Canberra Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Poetry Prize. Jeanine also teaches creative writing and Aboriginal literature at the University of Melbourne. So all of this is to say that we are in very good hands here. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Ellen and Jeanine to the screen. Hello.
Hello.
It's great to have you back with us, Jeanine, 2 years running. You're back in a very different way, of course. And Ellen, it's such a pleasure to welcome you to our inaugural online festival. I'm going to hand over to Jeanine to introduce Ellen. We're very much looking forward to this conversation and hearing about your work, hopefully hearing some of your poetry. So I'll let Jeanine introduce you and leave you both to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Before I go on to introduce Ellen, I would also like to acknowledge that I belong to the Wiradjuri people on the Murrumbidgee River, and I like to pay my respects to my elders, past, present and emerging, and particularly to the people who raised me at home. I'd also like to acknowledge today that I'm speaking from Ngunnawal, Ngambri country here in Canberra between the Brindabillers and also on the Murrumbidgee River, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I really like to welcome Ellen and look forward to this conversation. Ellen van Neerven is an award-winning writer and editor of Mununjali and Gumbair descent and Dutch heritage. Ellen's first book, Heat and Light, was the recipient of the David Jeanine Award and the Dobby Literary Award and the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards for Indigenous Writing. And Ellen's second book, a collection of poetry, Comfort Food, was shortlisted for the New South Wales Kenneth Slessor Awards and highly commended in the 2016 Wesley McKell Wright Prize. And Throat is Ellen's second collection of poetry. Welcome, Ellen.
Chingaree. I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on Turrbal and Yagara country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging on this land. I would also like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people of who I'm connecting, with this festival in a digital space, and particularly acknowledge you, Jeanine, as a Wiradjuri woman, and all of the Wiradjuri women in my life that have given me teachings and learnings and have connected to me as family. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to be in conversation with you today.
Thank you, Ellen. The name of our panel is Present Tense, Our Uneasy Inheritance. And when I was thinking about this and leading this discussion, I started thinking about tense, the idea of tense in its full sense of the word. It means both a specific moment in time, past tense, present tense, future tense, but it also means a condition, a state, an inability to be able to relax, feeling stressed and feeling anxious. And I think for First Nations people, tense freezes us in times. In times, it captures us in certain moments, in representations, in images that are not of our own making and much less to our own liking. And this kind of tense makes us and leaves us tense. And First Nations Halaku writer and academic and poet Amberlynn Quamelina writes of Western time, a version of time that is always carrying people away from an unchangeable past into an unknowable future, giving the illusion of progress, regardless of whether anything has changed. I think as a First Nations writer, I read this work and your other works, and I think you write time differently. And I was wondering if you'd like to comment on how you write time.
Differently to whom, Jeanine, just to clarify?
How you write time in your work as a First Nations writer differently to how I perceive Western time.
Such a big question. Thank you. I guess broadly speaking, I think about time as a quite elastic and expansive, and I think so often Australia is called a young nation, where actually it's home to the oldest living culture in the world, and so I really think deeply about those 75,000 years plus of culture here, people here, and such a short time of the colonizers here, white people here. It's a very short time in comparison to a very long stretch of time and a long continuance. And so I'm really conscious of that in my writing. And I also don't really see this kind of solid line between the living and those who have passed away. I feel like I write to people who are maybe not physically here, but spiritually here, and to this land and to this country. And so that widens my audience in a way and makes me feel very conscious that I'm really continuing something that is still here, that's always will be here. And I'm less likely to think about what I'm doing as something new, because I know that it's already been done, it's already been said, and I'm just sort of the carrier of all of that knowledge. And so that's how I see time. And I often also look at the future as well as the present and the past as all things that are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then that, I'm thinking there's much in your book that references that you are not just writing to the people who are here in our present time. And I'm thinking of all those ways that Western people use time. And I think there's much in your work that is written far beyond that. And that's the responsibility of your writing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the title of your new anthology, Jeanine, Gawayu, which is what could you explain the meaning to that of that?
Yeah.
It doesn't really have a direct English translation, does it?
Not a neat English translation, but you can interpret, and I like to use the word interpret when we are, not just for my own language, but when we're talking about offering some sort of parallel meaning between our languages and English. The word interpret is more useful. There isn't anything direct. But yeah, Gawayu means, interpret, still and yet, which actually breaks down just those two words, still, continuing, and yet, into the future. And it breaks down that linear kind of separation between past, present, and future, and just encompasses both those times in this one word, which once again you can, if you interpret it, would mean for all times. And I think when I was writing in that framework and thinking about that, it changed the responsibility, my responsibility as a writer as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, we are responsible for, we're responsible for so much, I think, as First Nations writers and First Nations people. And we're not writing into an empty void. Actually, that would be very scary, I think, to sort of not feel that existence of other people here with us, forever with us, always with us.
That's a really great point, because I think people underestimate that or don't see it at all. Like, we're here to talk about, and we are going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about some of the gifts that we inherit as well. I think people think about a lot the uneasy or the difficult legacy that we inherit as First Nations people, but you've just beautifully articulated another one, that you feel the people who've gone before you, and you feel that in the now, and possibly the people who are going to come after you, and that is a great gift. And I don't think that everyone has that. I think that's something uniquely that we inherit as First Nations writers. Which is,
I would agree, yeah.
So I think as a writer, you subvert and challenge those notions of time in a lot of your works, but two in particular pieces that leap out to me, and I was wondering if you would read them, is I Grieve in Sleep, and that wonderful long poem called Chermy. And I was wondering if you would treat us to a reading.
Yeah, of course. So I'll read the poem, and then maybe we'll have a discussion. Sure. So this poem is called I Grieve in Sleep. I sleep topless, imagining my lover by my side, I kiss their cheek and hold their tired body. And here my dysphoria fades and my eyes shut as I ask them to unwrap secrets of their day. It's been weeks and months, and soon will be years. They haven't called or written or kissed me in so long. My friend insists this lover has gone. This love is gone. My spine keeps me here. It's not over. How can it be? Not while the butterflies are still breathing. Not while I still have crushed eucalypt in my hand.
Beautiful. And I guess what really leapt out to me about that poem is this contrasting between a friend who may be operating on a different time scale and tells you this is over. There's a lot of kind of words in there on the one hand that are suggesting this limited linearity of time. But then the way you end it around, well, it's not over till it's over. It's a poem very much about process rather than product, or means rather than ends. Would you like to talk a bit more about?
Yeah, I really have not met a First Nations person that talks about endings. It's very consistent with our people that we understand things are always in flux, things are always changing. And of course we have, seasons that are different to the Western, very, very, very different. And it's not arbitrary, it's not like the 1st of August is, a certain thing. It's all around this, the cycle of the natural world and the sort of the connection between one animal to another animal to a plant to, like everything sort of kind of happens in its own time. And so, things sort of it's not like a clock kind of thing. It's a different sense of time. And so, I sort of, instead of talking about things being over, we often talk about things, and it's something that I am reminded of, me, myself as a person, am reminded of in this poem, things, still being there, still being in country. And I just, when I read it, I thought about, the line about the butterflies. There was a lot, it's sort of like the bogor moth, like how prevalent they were. Like, I mean, there's so many, much more of them than there are today. Same with these butterflies in Brizzy, like really big butterflies that just like covered the sky, was so thick 200 years ago. There's less butterflies now, but they're still here, like that's, and butterflies are, so seasonal, like there's, different butterflies for different seasons. And so, when I see the butterflies, I'm reminded that, of that connection, I guess. For me, always having grown up here in Southeast Queensland, when I lived in Naarm for 2 years, again, I had to refamiliarize myself with the different seasons and the different animals and the different butterflies as being different to where I was from. And as soon as I sort of started to notice those really small, subtle details, I felt a lot more grounded as a person. And I'd had things around me like leaves, like my cousin gave me a shell from Mandurah by Stradbroke Island. And I just had it with me, like always, like it burnt a hole in my pocket, but it just made me feel, connected and like I wasn't alone. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what particularly leaps out at me, this idea that it's not over, this bucking this whole idea of end about means. Great. And would you share some of Chermy with us, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Chomi is like my favorite poem in Throat, and it's a lot of other people's favorite as well, because I think it's got so much story in it. It's a longer poem, so Jeanine and I discussed that I would just read an extract of it. And so it appears at the start of the book, one of the first poems. And Chermy, I guess, is, for those of you who don't know it, is the suburb. It's the name of a suburb called Chermside in Brisbane. It's like in the north, and it's sort of it's a very localized poem, but in the same time, I feel like it's quite universal. And I'll read it, and again we can talk about it later. Westfield Chermy is one of our sacred sites. Gammon. My grandparents came to Chermy in the early 50s. They had a house on Fee Street where my mother and her siblings grew up. They moved there after the two older children were born in Waco. Mum was the second born in Fee Street. The shopping centre first opened in 57, Chermside Drive-In Shopping Centre. Now it's the largest single-level shopping centre in Australia. It expanded and expanded and expanded over years. Mum remembers an oval surrounded by bush swimming pool in the middle. On the weekends, her and her brothers and sisters had the choice, go to the pool or the cinema. The Dawn opened in 28, shut in 2005, the last single-screen cinema in Brisbane. Round Chermy, everything's changed, some parts unrecognisable, but the houses near Fee Street, a pocket, has stayed the same old little houses. On Fee Street, the family's kids played together. Their names Arnie will know. The bush was all open. Could walk to the bush through to Geebung and Aspley to see friends, go to school. Geebung Primary, all you have to worry about was snakes, never wore shoes. Geebung Camp among the trees and Geebung Groves, the roads are old roads. Nana's warm arm against mine, Mum and Nanny touching by the bickie shop next to the butcher, strong deadly women ready to take on Chermy at peak hour on a Saturday morning. Pride of knowing where every shop is, always notice a new one coming up. Know the specials, keep the vouchers, push Nana on the motor scooter, push Nana along, save for Christmas. The decorations are different each year. Push Nana up the hill, tell your cousin you're coming over. Spend 4 hours looking for an outfit. Go to Best and Less, get some undies. Nanny always bought you bonds, said those girls need the best. Keep the docket, see if it fits. Each year our bodies change. We get older in changing rooms. We try to fit into jeans and schools that know our black mothers. Just trying to fit in. Chermy is always home. New swimmers, birthdays at the pool. The cinemas make us cry sometimes. My mum will kill me true if I don't separate my recycling before I leave the food court. My brother is up playing pinball. He refuses to give me his tokens and lollies. He'll be saving them for weeks. Westfield's sacred to us. Women are the gatherers. Make our houses safe. Make our families safe. My mum, grandmother, aunties took care of me good. I never had to worry about anything much. Protected us when we were little. We were jarjums. Now we can, with greater ease, make our own mistakes.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, look, Chermy reads to me like as a testimony of this, really deep, continuing presence of Aboriginal matriarchs in this place. That is now the largest single shopping centre in Australia. But that part, particularly the last part that you read about Westfield is sacred to us and that the women are gatherers. I mean, that just speaks so loudly and clearly to that Gawayu in my language, Gawayu, that still and yet and for all times.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that poem might have surprised some readers because I'm talking about, that idea of, like practicing, all of that you talked about in an urban environment, in a Westfield shopping center, which people might go, like, how is that, relevant to First Nations lives? But everything that we did in that shopping center or around that shopping center was about us as a family and, us as our identity and growing up. So I think, yeah, it's kind of, for me, it was a really important piece to write, I think.
No, I think it is a really important piece to write. I mean, among all the other important things you've written, and in addition to what that poem does in speaking to continuance that I've just said, it also just speaks to that that urbanness of continuousness of urban Black communities that people tend to forget about, and like there's nothing deculturated about that poem at all, particularly when you speak about women being gatherers.
Yeah.
So we do inherit an uneasy legacy, but it isn't the only thing we inherit. We're not just people whose inheritance for the future and for our children is burdensome. It's undeniable that we inherit, that some of the legacy we inherit is uneasy and traumatic. But I think it's important to remember that we also inherit a lot of really positive things as well, that particularly come to the fore in your work. And just to name a few, there's biculturalism, like that ability to live in two worlds. There's stoicism, resilience, and there's a tremendous collective memory that is the sum of us. Talk a bit about that largely unseen and underrated legacy of the Aboriginal home, or the home front, which I think is the cradle and the soul of First Nations activism.
And yeah. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, Jeanine, just personally, that just how underrated and unrepresented the activism in the home, in the domestic space, in particular by women and female identifying people and non-binary people. Instead of, like we can see a very kind of stereotypical image of protest or activism or resistance as being, a very kind of, on the streets, the tent embassy, in a kind of very male kind of,
very
which really erases all of what women do to even put men in those positions that they can do that. And, we as a community are always supporting each other. But a lot of that emotional and physical labor of women is consistently disregarded and not seen as important. And historically, it's been kind of the backbone of, the whole nation, So, I think it's very undervalued. And that's why I try to always talk about this in my work. And I think it's that kind of really, there's just so much in it. There's so many conversations that happen in the home. I see that you have
I was going to say
a dear friend's book, a dear auntie's book,
While your work was a completely different medium, I remember writing about the home front when I was writing about Auntie Carrie's work as well, and about yours. And I said, like exactly, like this home front is the bedrock and the cutting edge of First Nations activism a long time before you ever get to that man with the megaphone and the flag flying.
Yes.
And the crowds. Yeah. And I also noted in that review that stoicism and strength emanate through your words, and many of your poems draw on this strength of home. And one among the many really powerful poems that you've written from the domestic scene, from the home front in throat, is called Vinegar. And I just love the poem. And I was wondering if you'd read that for us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I just wanted to just talk, just about, just really just quickly say that home building, so important, and women creating these spaces where we can be safe, it's so important, I think of my nana, who would probably be the first person to say that she wasn't very political, and she didn't wave the flag or anything. This was like before that kind of thing was as popular as it is now, but she led a very politicized life, and she raised 7 children. She kept them safe, and now we're a very strong family of about 100 people, and she's that matriarch behind all of us as people. So extraordinary. I'm going to read Vinegar.
Thank you.
Sometimes the house is unclean. In this panic, I find myself in both past and future. When we clean houses, we do so knowing that they are watching and our lives depend on it. When we teach our children to clean houses, we do so knowing that they are watching and our lives depend on it. I honor your cleaning recipes. Squatting on the shower floor. I will not have to work as hard, and I don't have your burdens. But I wonder, does the intergenerational load get lighter or heavier?
Yeah, beautiful. That poem speaks so powerfully to, I had so many visions of women doing that, and I do that myself. And that speaks very clearly to this, to strength, but it also to the uneasy inheritance of surveillance. And that brings for, I think, the meaning of tense that I was talking about at the start, is because that poem's about always being caught in someone else's time and always being caught in someone else's image. And then how tense, you say the poem begins with you feel panicked.
Totally, yeah. And I have to acknowledge our sister Natalie Harkin, who put together that great collection that people should check out, that's on the Cordite Poetry Review website, of called Domestic, which is a collection of many other First Nations poets writing to that theme. Like for me, like writing about something that's happening, I'm feeling, but connects to so much more of a history and legacy. My mum will be the first person to tell me that I'm not a very domesticated person. And I would much rather watch a film or read a book than I would clean the bathroom. But when I do clean the bathroom, I often feel that wave of panic that I describe in that poem, and I always try and talk myself out of it, but it's always there because for people before me, I live in a luxury. I can, I don't have to spotlessly clean my bathroom. But there was that fear of, they said that we were dirty people. They said that about a lot of other people, migrant communities here. But actually, go into our houses and we have the cleanest houses because, that scrutiny of having a clean house. Otherwise, the children might be taken away. If you were working for a white woman, if you didn't clean, like that threat of violence was just very extreme. And Jeanine, like you said, that surveillance culture, which I think for people who haven't experienced it and are maybe experiencing it for the first time under COVID, it's completely, what it does to your psyche. It's just you're always sort of living, under the thumb of some other person that's, or not person, sorry, system that has control of your life. And so, it's really, it's still happening for our people. So for me, it was, I still think that it's so important to try and express those feelings and those emotions.
Of continuance. Look, I still, to this day, I can't handle I've got to have my front door and the passage where you open my front door into my house. That's just got to be spotless.
Yeah.
I still can't. And I used to drive my family mad by making them pick up everything around the front door and keep the entrance clear. But
I know I've driven people crazy about how anxious I am about if I have visitors and just how everything has to be perfect. And it seems irrational, but it does come from that reality. And that's why I say in that last line, does the intergenerational load get lighter or heavier? Because we are carrying so much trauma. I'm probably of that first generation, or maybe you are, Jeanine, where we can actually take a moment, a breather, to reflect on all of what's happened in these last 250 years. And it's a huge, it's a huge heaviness, I think, to sort of reflect on all of what's happened and what is continuing to happen.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think I saw myself as the first generation of a long line of women who had that space and probably had the words. Even begin to actually articulate some of that carried burden of surveillance and always being watched. But we sort of segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about. You write in one of your pieces, without colonialism, there'd be nothing to write about. And then in the opening untitled piece, you also write, there seems to be nothing else to write about now but my trauma. But as soon as I read those lines, I thought, wow, the irony of these is high. And so let's talk a bit about the pernicious inheritance of deficit models, or as Daniel, a Cherokee academic and writer Daniel Heath Justice puts it, the habit that settlers have of always casting us as the products of trauma.
I really like Daniel Heath Justice's work. He's got some really solid stuff. I think being very tongue-in-cheek with those two statements. I think it happens in so many different settings, the medical setting, for example, where we are constantly seen as this having this sort of narrative that's not a good narrative. It's like when Morrison said that there was there's a 20-year difference in people over 50 that are non-Indigenous, people over 70 that are non-Indigenous stay home, This is when the first wave happened of COVID. People who are over 50, if you're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, stay home. So that's a 20-year health life expectancy difference, which is a really it's a really heavy thing, and our people are so often face kind of problems accessing medical services because of this script has already been written on like what's going to happen to you, and we sort of lose that autonomy to be able to sort of say, actually I think this is wrong and this is what I need, this is what I want. So yeah, we do need our own health kind of stuff, and that's another chat. But then I think, in terms of publishing, we both are writers that publish. So we, in some ways, we are often held to this thing where, potentially the expectations on us as First Nation writers are to write a particular thing. And, there's a lot of literature that is expected to follow this script of, what's the most traumatic thing that's happened to you? Can you write about it? And it's been really exacerbated by the internet. There's just like countless articles out there that are, are very kind of, I feel in some ways, I don't know if this is helpful. I think what is the most radical and liberating thing is for us to set our own agenda on what we want to write about, what stories we want to tell, and not feel like we need to succumb to that pressure. Because I've definitely have felt it myself, where people ask you to write something and then there's that ulterior motive when they want you to write something that, might get those clicks. People might that clickbait, like we want to kind of. So I've learned to be very careful in how I, and I think my poems were trying to sort of claim some of that authority to be able to write how I want to, which is with a sense of irony, which is with humor, which is like, I'm going to tell you what I want to tell you right now, and nothing more, nothing less. Just stick with me. And I sort of felt quite good about arriving in that place, but it wasn't easy to sort of strike that balance of you obviously, I think you have to be vulnerable as a writer, but you don't want to do it as a cost to yourself or to your community or your family, or tell a story that you're not allowed to tell, or that you probably shouldn't have told, or there's something that's going to like haunt you in the future. So
that you don't want to tell yourself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. How do you feel about that sort of thing?
I do feel exactly the same way. And I think what you said about it's important for you and it's important for all of us to tell the stories we want to tell, because otherwise we're going to just fall into this further layer of cognitive kind of literary colonialism where we're producing stories that go into a colonial trope of trauma.
And I really want to tell stories of futures where we are strong and we are in control, and our young people and our old people, because for me, in our culture, they're the two most important, like our elders and our jarjums, our young people, for them to have, to be looked after and to feel like they have a purpose, and that there's something for them, that they, that the possibilities are open for them.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's really important. I really want to tell the story of women who have agency. Well, they might make a lot of mistakes, but the agency is their own agency.
Yes.
And they don't remain paralyzed, I think, by trauma. But yeah. And I read a lot of your writing as resisting that trope. So And I think this is the other thing I read out of your work is, as First Nations peoples, history fails us. I don't think anyone will argue with that. Audre Lorde reminds us that good poetry works hard to do what history fails to do. There's so much in that. But just for the purposes of this discussion, I read so much of that in your poetry, particularly in some of the poems that were harrowing but so important, that you wrote about ongoing calls for social justice, especially for First Nations women. And there were a couple of poems like Silenced Identity and Women Are Still Not Being Heard. And Silenced Identity in particular asks us to think about the murdered and the missing, spoken about only in courts and tabloids. And I was wondering if you wanted to speak more broadly about ways in which you think history fails us, or how you think your writing, did that motivate you, and particularly with those harrowing but very important poems you wrote.
Yeah, I think that poem pays my is in the memory and pays my deep respect to the lives of Miss Du,
Yes.
Miss Clark, so many women, so many deaths in custody. Unfortunately, we just had one a few days ago in the city courthouse here.
I'm sorry.
An auntie passed away. There's an investigation ongoing, but it's police investigating police. So we really don't have much confidence in the system. And we've seen these latest, outcomes of some of these tragedies, like with Auntie Tanya Day, how there's no justice, and it's really, the first thing that I saw, the first thing that I felt on Friday was, why does this keep happening again? When will it end? When will it stop? And just feeling so awful for the family. And just, so I think, to answer your question, I think we write, but we are just, feeling very caught in these systems that continue to fail our people, and for there, never to be any real sense of justice or even acknowledgement of a life lost, when it feels like the priority is somewhere else, and Black lives to these systems do not matter, because if they did, things would look a lot differently, and we would have a lot more control. I went to see a beautiful piece, dance piece, on the weekend, by Thomas Kelly, who's a Yugambeh brother, and the piece was called Silence. And I started to think about it, and it, very much talking about treaty making and just how silenced our voices have been for the last 250 years. And I started to think about it. I was like, wow, isn't that interesting that two Yugambeh people independently both released works, one called Throat and one called Silenced, in 2020. It's just, for me, it's just like, there's some, it's
one coincidence. I think that's those presences that you were talking about. Yeah. And so, history fails us that way, and you speak to that very much in poems like Silenced Identity and Women Are Still Not Being Heard. History also fails to tell the strength and resilience of us.
Yeah.
And in making this comment, I'm thinking in particular about a lot of your poetry, but one in particular that leaps out at me is this beautiful poem, A Portrait of Destiny. And if you wanted to share that with us, and we can talk a bit.
Yeah, I would love to share this one. Because you're right, Jeanine, we, as much as, we do really need to reflect on the strengths, and how, our survival, and there's not, I'm not for celebrating that, because I think our survival has come at a real personal cost. So there's no joy in that, but there is a lot of strength, a lot of power, a lot of warmth, and a lot of continuance. And I just think about how much, I, lean on older women in my life that have really always been there for me, and how much love we have. And so when I was writing this work, I think a lot of people would know that I'm very, as well as being influenced by First Nations writers that have come before me and are, working alongside me, I'm also very influenced by other art forms. And there's a lot of beautiful visual artists that have created really beautiful work that inspires me. And one of them is Destiny Deacon. And I got a commission by the Queensland Art Gallery to write some poems reflecting on their Australian collection. And I really wanted to write a poem to one of Destiny's works. And what I saw with Destiny, I saw how generous she is in her artwork, in honoring other people. And I thought, she's done all these series of portrait works. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to actually do a portrait of her in a poem, do my own version of a portrait. So that's why I called it Portrait of Destiny. And it begins with this quote from Destiny, which is, I don't live as an artist. Kaku Arab Mer woman, sharp, strong, relational. History, politics, photography, performance, radio, video, installation. Thanks, sis, for taking the white people's invention, putting your black eye behind the lens, representing us. I also feel when I'm sitting on the couch. I'm always feeling too much. Telling stories sometimes is the only way out. Thanks, sis, for dropping the C for us urban blacks. You gave us a way to break free from their expectations, define our identity on our own terms. Brunswick sister, wherever you are, lounge, living room, island, dark room, gallery, lecture hall, classroom. You're deadly, sis. Too deadly.
Great. Yeah, I love that piece. Because Destiny, I think that's a good place almost to finish around, because we're almost out of time. But also, like, Destiny gave us that term, black. Yeah, and dropping the C, and that's the thing that distinguishes us as First Nations people from our allies across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
African American, Blacks, who we have a lot in common with, but we are also distinct as First Nations.
Yeah, you're right. Giving us that very specific identity. Yeah. And I love using BLAK. I really feel empowered by using that term, and I feel like so many other people are also use that as well. Yeah.
And I think you hit on something else when you were talking before too. You said something really important. You said you're not up for celebrating because our continuance and our inheritance of the present has come at a tremendous cost. It has. So I think you're right. Celebrate's not the right word, but to tribute it.
Yeah.
Tribute the past and tribute those who've come before us. I think it's really important. And I thought it was important.
I mean, I'm watching the Kathy Freeman doco tonight. It's tonight, I keep going. I hope I don't miss it. But it's tonight. And can you believe that was 20 years ago? I mean, that was an incredible moment for, I think, so many of us. Yeah.
Well, I just remember how pressured I felt. So I can imagine and everybody remembers where they were. But I'm really looking forward to that tonight. And I think to inherit, as a First Nations person, to inherit the present at all is a gift, because you talked about the tremendous high cost and the suffering and the loss and the sacrifice of people who've come before us. And so to inherit the present at all for us as First Nations people is a gift. And I was wondering if you'd like to comment on that, and I was wondering if you'd like to conclude this really great discussion we had. I really enjoyed it, on reading what you think may be your favourite poem.
Okay, yeah. I think I'm going to read the last poem in the book, because I think that really does speak to what you're saying about that honoring as being honoring in the present as being really special, really important. Just fills me with warmth to think about some of the great achievements and sacrifices, and that's I know I said it's an uneasy it's not necessarily celebrating, but just being really I think you put things in perspective when you think about the past and you think about some of the struggles that our elders and our ancestors had to endure. But we're still here, and we are telling stories, and we are continuing our ancestors' talk.
Yeah.
So this poem's called Sand.
Yep.
We sat up singing, covering our feet from the cold. The sand I carry in my heart is hot. The shadows are wet. My heritage is to honor those in my blood. We will not tire now. The song will keep going in us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we're at the end. Thank you. Thank you both for bringing Right Around the Murray to a close on such a rich, wide-ranging, amazing, fantastic conversation. I'm so pleased we've got this recorded and we can listen again. So much in there. Ellen, I loved what you said about the radical and liberating thing of setting your own agenda, and I feel like it's a gift to all of us that you've claimed your authority to set your own agenda in your writing. and the thing of taking a breather. It helps us all take a breather, and I don't just mean that intellectually. My experience reading your poems is I physically breathe easier. So thank you. I would like to remind people that you can get hold of Ellen's books in all good bookstores, I'm sure, and Janine's also. But Dymocks Albury has a great offer where they will deliver these books to you free of charge if you are local, and at a great discount if you live outside the area. Look, thank you both for this rich discussion. I've just got a couple of words to wrap up the festival. I'd be pleased if you wouldn't mind hanging here with me for a moment while I do that. The truly fantastic thing about delivering this festival online is that it's meant we've been able to bring the work of incredible authors and these sort of enriching and important discussions to a much bigger audience, a massive audience in comparison to what we can accommodate over the 5 days of a normal festival. And we, many of the conversations will be available for replay, and we'll be podcasting the audio of these conversations. Look, there are very many thank yous to be made at this point, and we will do that properly, more thoroughly on the website. But in the context of presenting WAM so differently this year, I do just want to thank a couple of people. Of course, I would like to acknowledge Albury City and the State Library of New South Wales for funding the festival. I would like to thank the technology for behaving. Oh my goodness, we've come through this without a glitch. And my colleague Chris Amore in particular for figuring out how on earth to pull this off, and for all the times the technology was not behaving, and there were a few, he calmly worked it out. To Amy Chan and Michelle Fricaro for spreading the word so ably, and Jackie Schultz for the gorgeous WAM trailer, which you can watch over and over again on our Facebook page. There's many more others who've helped us do this as well as we have. And so I speak on behalf of the WAM team and committee when I say how proud we are of this year's festival. We decided to do our best under the circumstances, and I think we have delivered one of our strongest festivals yet. For that, I want to thank the amazing writers and presenters who agreed to join with us for a digital festival, and to all of you who tuned in to let us know we had your attention. Thank you. We would also love to hear your feedback. We've got a very short online survey which you'll find at writearoundthemurray.org.au. So yes, back to amazing writers. Thank you again, Jeanine Leane and Ellen van Neerven.
Thank you.
Ogling.